All right, number 6. So here we're finding the 38th derivative of this function here, right, is what that means. Remember, another way that you may see this is f, the 38th derivative of f that way, right? That's another way to say the same thing. Take the 38th derivative of a function. You can say it this way, Leibniz notation, or this way, Lagrange notation. With Lagrange, make sure you put the parentheses there, right, if you use that notation. All right. So here we have a sine function, right? We know there's a pattern with sine and cosine that they repeat every fourth iteration, right? And so we can take this number, whatever the derivative is, whatever the order of the derivative, and divide by 4, and then we'll get a number. And that number, the decimal of that number, I should say, tells us something, right? So here, 38 divided by 4 is 9.5, right? And it really doesn't matter that there's a 9 there. Really, all we care about is the decimal. And the decimal tells us that we end up in the second the second iteration of the pattern, right? So if we start out with sine, remember our little table here was, if this is sine, then y prime is cosine, right? Y double prime is negative sine. Y triple prime is negative cosine, and then y, the fourth derivative of y is back to sine, right? And then we start the pattern all over again. So remember that if we start with this, then if after we divide by 4 we get 0.25, we end up with that first step. 0.5, we end up with that second step. 0.75, we end up with that third step, and then no decimal, or whole number. That means we end up back where we started, right, with sine. And so in this case, since we have a 0.5 here, that means we're going to end up with this, right? So our answer is going to be d to the 38th y dx to the 38th is going to be negative 6 sine x. So notice that the 6 just tags along for the ride, right? But really, this is what we're looking at there, okay? So that's going to be our final answer. Now remember, there is a whole different chart for cosine, so keep that in mind, right? So for cosine, you would just do the same thing, right? Start with cosine. If you don't have this chart, we wrote it down on the board one day, but if you don't have this chart, then go ahead and make your own, right? Just take the first derivative, second derivative, third derivative, just all those, right? But do it with cosine, and then you can align those values with those derivatives, okay?